The battlefield was silent now. Smoke rose from the broken ground and the air smelled of blood and burning metal. The alien woman lay on her knees, her hands tied behind her back with rough rope. Her people were gone. Some had fled. Some had died. She was alone. In front of her stood the humans, tall, armored, and armed. Their eyes were cold, their voices sharp, their boots heavy against the ground. She had always been told that humans were monsters, cruel, merciless, killers without pity. And now she was their prisoner. Her heart pounded inside her chest. Every breath was sharp and painful. She looked down, not daring to meet their gaze. She expected them to strike her at any moment. She had seen humans kill without hesitation. Why would they spare her? A soldier shouted something in their rough language, and two men pulled her up to her feet. Her legs shook. She could barely stand. They pushed her forward and she stumbled, nearly falling. Laughter echoed behind her. To them she was nothing, a defeated enemy, a trophy. They dragged her through the ruined battlefield until they reached the human camp. Fires burned in metal barrels. Weapons glowed with strange blue light. Everywhere she looked, humans moved like shadows, resting, sharpening blades, checking strange machines. She felt smaller than ever before. At the center of the camp, a tall officer stepped out of a tent. His armor shone. His face was sharp like a blade, and his eyes narrowed when he saw her. He spoke quickly to the soldiers, his voice filled with anger. The woman did not understand the words, but she understood the meaning. Execution. She froze. Her body went cold. This was it. Her end. The officer pointed at one soldier standing near the fire. A man with dark hair, a scar on his cheek, and silent eyes. The officer handed him a blade. He gave a short order, then turned away. The soldiers pushed the alien woman toward the man with the blade. She could not stop shaking. This human was chosen to kill her. She expected him to strike quickly without thought. That was what humans did. That was what she had always believed. The man stood still, holding the blade at his side. His eyes were locked on her. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The camp grew quieter around them as if waiting. She closed her eyes. Her heart screamed in her chest. She thought of her family, her people, the green fields of her home world. She thought of how unfair it was to die like this, powerless, in the hands of the enemy. But the blade did not come. She opened her eyes slowly. The man was still standing there, but he had not raised his weapon. His face was unreadable, neither cruel nor kind. Only calm. The other soldiers shouted at him, confused. Why was he waiting? Why did he not finish it? The alien woman's fear grew sharper. She could not understand this human. Why delay death? Was he playing with her? Was this cruelty of another kind? The officer barked another command, louder this time. The man finally moved. He stepped closer, his boots crunching against the dirt. She stiffened, expecting the strike. Instead, he cut the rope from her wrists. The rope fell to the ground. Her arms were free, but she did not move. She could not believe what had happened. Her eyes widened, her breath caught in her throat. The soldiers around them gasped. Some shouted. The officer turned, fury flashing in his eyes. The man with the scar did not look at anyone else. His gaze stayed on her. Silent. Steady. Almost human. The alien woman's world spun. She had expected death, but instead, she had been spared. Why? The question burned inside her as the camp erupted with angry voices. The officer stormed forward, demanding an answer. The other soldiers pointed, confused and shocked. But the man with the scar said nothing. He only stood between her and them, the blade still in his hand. Not to kill her, but to protect her. For the first time in her life, the alien woman wondered if everything she had been told about humans was wrong. The night grew darker. The fires burned higher, and the silence between them carried a strange, dangerous promise. And so, her story with the human began. Whispers spread like fire among the humans. Soldiers muttered in low voices, their eyes filled with suspicion. Why had the scarred man refused the order? Why had he not killed the alien? Some thought he was weak, others thought he had gone mad. But none dared to speak too loudly, for the officer's fury was already heavy in the air. The alien woman sat near a wooden post, her hands resting on her knees. She had not tried to run. Where could she go? All around her, humans stood with weapons ready. Escape meant death. Yet her mind was not on freedom. It was on him, the human with the scar. He was different. That night, the camp grew quieter. Fires burned low, sending shadows across the ground. Most soldiers laughed and drank, celebrating victory, but the scarred man did not join them. Instead, he sat across from her, a short distance away, sharpening his blade. His face was calm, his eyes unreadable. She kept stealing glances at him, her heart racing. Every time his eyes lifted, she looked away quickly, afraid of what she might see there. Why had he spared her? Why risk angering his commander? Humans killed without question. She had seen it with her own eyes. Yet this one had chosen differently. Hours passed. The cold of the night crept in. She shivered, hugging her arms to her chest. She had no blanket, no warmth. Her body trembled from exhaustion and fear. Then, without a word, the scarred man stood. The sound of his boots made her flinch. He walked to the fire, picked up a spare blanket, and returned to her side. He did not speak, nor did he meet her gaze. He simply dropped the blanket over her shoulders and walked back to his place by the fire. Her eyes widened. She gripped the rough cloth tightly, the warmth sinking into her cold skin. It was the smallest gesture, yet it broke through her fear like a crack in stone. For a moment, she forgot she was his prisoner. For a moment, she felt human. The next morning, the camp moved. Soldiers prepared their weapons and machines. The alien woman was forced to walk with them, always surrounded, always watched. The scarred man walked near her, silent as ever. Whenever she stumbled, his hand would steady her, strong but gentle. He never pushed, never struck her as the others did. He was like a shadow that protected instead of punished. The other soldiers noticed. They whispered, smirked, and mocked him behind his back. Protector of the alien, they laughed. Maybe he loves her already. But none dared to say it to his face. The scar on his cheek was proof of battles fought, and even the cruelest soldier knew better than to challenge him. That evening, when the camp rested again, she found herself watching him more closely. His silence was strange. He spoke to no one, laughed at nothing. He sat alone, sharpening his blade, his eyes lost in thought. Was he like her? Alone? The questions grew heavy in her heart. When night fell again, she dared to whisper across the distance, her voice trembling. Why? The human's head lifted slightly, but he did not answer. His eyes met hers in the firelight. For a moment she thought he would speak, but then he turned back to his blade. Silence. Yet that silence spoke louder than words. The next day, she saw it again. When other soldiers pushed her, when they laughed at her weakness, he did not join them. Instead, his hand brushed her arm, steadying her. His eyes held no cruelty. Confusion filled her chest. She had been ready to die, ready for pain, ready for the sharp end of his blade. But instead, she had found his watchful eyes, his quiet protection, his strange kindness. And yet, she could not trust it. Not fully. Not yet. Humans were deceivers, her people had always said. Maybe this was only a cruel game. Maybe he would break her later when her guard was down. But when the camp grew silent that night, she looked across the fire and saw him again, sitting alone, his scarred face lit by flame, his blade resting at his side. And she felt something she had never felt before. Not fear, not hate. Something else. Something dangerous. Something that made her heart race faster than fear ever could. She turned away quickly, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. She told herself it was nothing, just her mind playing tricks, just exhaustion. But in the dark of night, when the camp slept and only the fire burned low, She opened her eyes again and found his gaze already on her. Silent, steady, watching, and, in that silence, a bond neither of them understood began to grow. The human camp woke before sunrise. Boots stamped on the dirt, weapons clattered, and voices barked orders. Smoke from the fires drifted through the air, carrying the bitter smell of war. The alien woman sat near the center of the camp, her wrists bound again. Her eyes were heavy with fear. For 2 nights she had been left alive. For 2 nights the scarred human had spared her, but mercy in war never lasted long. This morning felt different. The officer appeared, his armor shining in the pale light. His eyes burned with anger as they swept across the soldiers, then landed on her. He barked sharp words she could not fully understand, but his gestures were clear. He wanted her gone. He wanted her executed. The soldiers stirred with restless energy. Some nodded in agreement, others smirked as though the idea pleased them. Death was entertainment to them. The officer's gaze turned to the scarred man. He pointed at the alien woman, then drew his hand across his throat in the universal sign of death. His meaning needed no words. The scarred man stood slowly. His face was calm, but his eyes darkened as he reached for his blade. He stepped forward, boots heavy against the earth. The camp fell silent, all eyes fixed on him. The alien woman froze. Her breath caught in her chest. This was it. No more delay. No more strange kindness. He would kill her now, as his commander demanded. Her heart hammered inside her chest. She thought of her family. She thought of her people's fields, green and full of light. She thought of how her life would end in the dirt of an enemy camp, her blood staining foreign soil. The scarred man stopped in front of her. He drew the blade, steel flashing in the morning light. His expression revealed nothing. The officer shouted, again urging him to strike. The other soldiers leaned closer, eager to see the moment. The alien woman's body trembled. She closed her eyes, ready for the pain, ready for the end. Her lips moved silently, whispering the final prayers of her people, but the pain did not come. The seconds stretched like hours. She dared to open her eyes. The scarred man stood over her, blade raised, but not to strike. His hand shook slightly, not with fear, but with choice. His jaw tightened. His eyes burned with conflict. The officer roared in rage, stepping closer, his hand reaching for his own weapon, and then it happened. The scarred man dropped his blade. It hit the ground with a heavy clang, sending shock through the silent camp. Gasps broke out among the soldiers. Whispers rushed like wind through the crowd. He refused. He disobeyed. The officer's face twisted with fury. He shouted, spitting, words like fire. His hand pointed at the scarred man again, demanding obedience, demanding blood. But the scarred man did not move. He stood tall, unshaken, his gaze locked on the alien woman. For a moment, their eyes met. Her fear mixed with confusion. Why? Why risk everything for her? Why protect an enemy? The officer stormed forward, his hand grabbing the scarred man's shoulder. He shouted again, face red with rage. The scarred man turned slowly, his eyes cold as ice. The silence between them grew heavy, dangerous. The alien woman could feel the tension. The camp was split in two. Some soldiers ready to side with their commander, others too afraid of the scarred man's strength. And then, without warning, the scarred man pushed past the officer. He walked toward the alien woman, his movements steady, his decision final. He bent down, cutting her bonds with a swift motion. The ropes fell away. She stared at him, stunned, unable to speak. Her hands trembled with freedom she did not understand. The officer's roar shook the camp. He shouted, for guards, for chains, for punishment. But the scarred man raised his blade again, not against her, but against his own people. Gasps filled the camp once more. This was more than mercy. This was defiance. The alien woman's chest tightened. She had expected to die by his hand, but instead he was ready to fight for her. Why? The question burned inside her as chaos spread around them. Some soldiers stepped forward, unsure if they should obey their commander or face the scarred man's wrath. Others held back, unwilling to challenge a warrior they respected and feared. The officer shouted again, his face red with fury, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword. But before he could strike, the scarred man's voice cut through the camp, low, firm, final. The alien woman could not understand his words, but the silence that followed told her everything. He had chosen, and with that choice, her fate had changed forever. She had waited for the human's blade. She had expected death, but instead, she found mercy. Mercy, and something more dangerous still. After the scarred man refused to kill her, anger spread like poison among the soldiers. Some looked at him with fear, others with disgust, but none dared to move against him openly, not yet. The officer shouted, cursed, and threatened, but even he hesitated. The scarred man's reputation was too strong. His silence was more dangerous than the commander's rage. That night, the alien woman sat in the corner of the camp, her wrists free, but chains now locked around her ankles. She hugged her knees close to her chest, eyes wide with confusion. She could still feel the moment. When he cut her bonds, still hear the sound of the blade falling instead of striking. Why? Why would a human protect her? Across the fire, the scarred man sat alone as always, sharpening his weapon. His face was calm, his movements steady, but his eyes were different now. They were watchful. Every time another soldier passed, too close to her, his gaze sharpened. Every time someone mocked her in low whispers, his hand gripped his blade tighter. The alien woman felt something she had never felt before. Safety in the presence of a human. When the camp finally slept, the officer left guards to watch her. But even guards grew lazy. The fire burned low and the night turned cold. She pulled the thin blanket tighter around her, but her body trembled. Her world was already broken, yet something inside her still clung to life. She closed her eyes, whispering the names of her family, the prayers of her people. But suddenly she felt something strange. A shadow near her. Her body tensed. She opened her eyes quickly. It was him. The scarred man stood before her, his tall frame blocking the firelight. She froze, her heart racing. Was this the moment he would finally kill her in secret? Would he strike her when no one else watched? He crouched down slowly, his movements careful. His eyes met hers, steady and calm. She wanted to pull back, but the chains kept her in place. Without a word, he reached forward, her breath caught. Her body stiffened, but his hand did not hold a weapon. Instead, his rough fingers brushed her shoulder gently, adjusting the blanket around her. His touch was warm, careful, almost protective. The alien woman's eyes widened. She did not move, did not breathe. His hand lingered for only a moment before he pulled away. He did not smile. He did not speak. He only nodded once as if to say, "You are safe." Then he stood and walked back to his place by the fire. Her chest tightened. She had never felt so confused. Humans were killers, humans were monsters. That was what she had been told all her life. But this human, his touch was not cold, not cruel. It carried something she did not understand. The night passed slowly, and sleep never came. Each time she closed her eyes, she felt the ghost of his touch again, gentle, careful, alive. The next morning, the camp moved again. Soldiers shouted, machines groaned, and boots stamped against the dirt. The alien woman walked with chains on her ankles, stumbling often. The path was rough, her legs weak. At one point, she nearly fell to the ground, but a hand caught her. Strong, fingers gripped her arm, steadying her. She looked up quickly. It was him. The scarred man did not speak. He only helped her stand, then released her slowly, as if afraid to frighten her. Their eyes met for the briefest moment, and she felt heat rush through her chest. He moved ahead, silent as always, but she could not forget the way his hand had held her. Not rough, not cruel, but steady. That evening, the camp stopped near the mouth of a wide cave. The soldiers lit fires and set up their defenses. The alien woman sat by the rocks, watching the flames flicker. The scarred man approached her again. This time he placed a small piece of bread in her hands. She looked at him, stunned. She had eaten scraps, tasteless food thrown to her like she was an animal, but this, he gave it directly, his eyes steady as though she was equal. Her hands shook as she held the bread. For a long moment she could not eat. She could only stare at him. He crouched down slightly, his scar catching the firelight. Finally he spoke a single word in his language. She did not understand the meaning, but his tone was soft, urging. Slowly she took a bite. The taste was simple, but her heart felt heavy. It was not the food that mattered. It was the gesture. He stood again, walking back to his place. His silence was endless, but now she saw it differently. It was not the silence of cruelty, but of choice. He chose not to hurt her. He chose not to speak lies. His silence was pure. That night, as the wind howled through the cave, she pulled the blanket tight around her shoulders. She felt her chest ache with something she had no name for. Fear still lived inside her, yes. But beneath the fear, something else had begun to grow, something far more dangerous. The cave was quiet except for the crackling fire. Shadows stretched long across the stone walls, and the cold wind outside echoed like a ghost's cry. The alien woman sat close to the flames, her blanket pulled tight around her thin shoulders. Her stomach still felt the warmth of the bread he had given her. The scarred man sat across from her, sharpening his blade as always. His silence had become something she almost expected, steady, constant, like the beat of a heart. But tonight she wanted answers. She looked at him through the firelight, her eyes narrow with both fear and curiosity. Finally she whispered, her voice trembling, "Why did you spare me?" The words left her lips like a secret. For a moment she thought he had not heard. His hands kept moving, the blade scraping against stone. Then he paused. Slowly, he lifted his gaze to hers. The firelight caught his scar, making his face look harsher than his eyes truly were. He spoke in his own language, short and low. She could not understand the words, but the tone was soft, steady, almost gentle. Her heart raced. She leaned forward slightly as if she might hear meaning beyond language, but he spoke no more. He returned to his silence, and the unanswered question burned inside her. Still, she noticed something different. His eyes had softened, if only for a moment, and that was enough to keep her awake all night. The next morning, the soldiers broke camp. The alien woman was forced to march again, chains around her ankles. The path was rough, filled with rocks and thorns. She stumbled often, her body weak from hunger and exhaustion. Each time she fell, laughter rose from the other soldiers. They mocked her, their voices cruel and sharp. But each time the scarred man was there, his hand reaching out, steadying her, lifting her back to her feet. He never joined in their laughter. His silence was stronger than their cruelty. By midday, they reached a forest. The trees rose tall and dark, their branches clawing at the sky. Shadows fell thick across the ground. The soldiers set camp again, their fires small and quick. The forest felt dangerous, alive with unseen eyes. That night, as the camp grew quiet, the alien woman found herself sitting closer to him. She didn't plan it. Her body moved on its own, drawn by some force she could not name. For a long time, neither spoke. The fire cracked. The wind sighed. Finally, she whispered again, her voice low. "My people told me humans are only killers." His eyes met hers, calm and unreadable. She looked down, gripping her blanket. "But you are not like them." He tilted his head slightly as if considering her words. Then, slowly, he reached out. His hand brushed her arm, gentle, careful, like the first night. She stiffened at first, but this time, she did not pull away. The warmth of his touch sank into her skin, It was not cruel. It was not harsh. It was alive. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought he might hear it. She met his eyes again, and for a moment the firelight between them felt like something more than heat. But before she could speak, voices shouted from the edge of the camp. Soldiers rushed to their feet, weapons drawn. The scarred man moved, instantly pulling her behind him. His body shielded hers, his blade ready. Shadows moved in the trees. Shapes. Eyes. Not human eyes. Her heart froze. Her people. The aliens. They had tracked her here. The forest exploded with noise, blades clashing, arrows flying, screams tearing through the night. The camp turned into chaos. The alien woman crouched behind him, trembling. For the first time, she felt torn. Her people were here. Her chance at freedom was here. But when she looked at the scarred man standing in front of her, defending her with his life, something inside her shifted. Her people would see him as an enemy. Her people would kill him. But could she let that happen? Could she return to them, now after what she had seen in him? The battle raged. He fought with silent fury, his scarred face hard with focus. He struck down every enemy who came close, never stepping aside, never leaving her exposed. When the chaos finally ended, bodies lay across the forest floor, both human and alien. Fires burned low, blood darkened the soil. The scarred man stood tall, his chest heaving, his blade stained red. The alien woman looked at him, her heart heavy with confusion. He had risked his life not just against his own people, but against hers. For her. Why? The question returned sharper than ever, but this time it was not filled with fear. It was filled with something far more dangerous. She pressed her hand against her chest, where her heart beat like a drum. She realized the truth she had tried to deny. She no longer feared him, she no longer hated him, she felt something else. Something she had never imagined she could feel for a human, and it terrified her more than death ever had. The forest was silent after the battle. Smoke rose from broken branches, and the ground was wet with blood. Human and alien bodies lay side by side, their lifeless eyes staring into the dark sky. The alien woman sat on a fallen log, her chest heavy with fear and confusion. Her people had found her, but they had tried to kill her along with the humans. She should have felt relief at their arrival, but all she felt was dread. And when she looked at the scarred man, standing tall with his blade still dripping, her heart twisted in ways she could not explain. He had fought for her, against everyone, against his own commander, against her people. But why? She did not know if she should trust him or fear him even more. That night, the humans buried their dead in silence. The officer's anger had cooled into something darker, watchful, calculating. The alien woman saw his eyes follow the scarred man with hate. She knew something was coming. Later, when most soldiers slept, the officer gathered a small group in secret. Their whispers carried through the camp like snakes in the grass. She did not understand the words, but she understood their eyes. They wanted the scarred man gone. He was no longer one of them. The alien woman's chest grew tight. A thought struck her like a knife. What if he betrayed her first to win back their trust? What if everything he had done so far was only a trick? Her people had always said humans were deceivers. She could not ignore that truth. When the camp slept, she sat with her back against the stone wall of the cave, staring at him across the dying fire. He sat alone as always, silent, sharpening his blade. His scar caught the faint light, his face calm, unreadable. She whispered into the dark, though he could not hear. "Will you betray me?" The question burned inside her chest, heavier with every passing moment. The next morning, danger came again. A group of enemy scouts ambushed the camp at dawn, their weapons flashing. Chaos filled the air. Arrows flew, blades clashed, men shouted in pain. The alien woman's chains made it impossible to flee. She pressed against the rocks, heart racing, watching the battle unfold. The officer saw his chance. His fury boiled as he charged at the scarred man, blade raised high. The soldiers who had whispered in the night followed behind him. For a moment she thought it was over. The scarred man would be outnumbered. He would fall. and she would be left alone, surrounded by humans who hated her. But then he moved. The Ming. Scarred man turned like a storm, his blade cutting through the first attacker with fierce precision. He blocked the officer's strike, sparks flying as steel clashed. The fight was brutal, fast, filled with the sound of steel tearing through air. The alien woman's breath caught. He was not fighting for glory. He was not fighting for orders. He was fighting for her. Every time the officer tried to move toward her, the scarred man blocked his path, his scarred face hard with fury. But the officer was strong, skilled, and filled with rage. His blade struck deep into the scarred man's side. Blood burst across his armor. The alien woman gasped, rising to her feet. He staggered but did not fall. He swung again, forcing the officer back. His body shook, blood dripping down his leg. But he did not stop. The soldiers hesitated now, fear in their eyes. The scarred man's silence was no longer calm, it was thunder. When the officer struck again, the scarred man drove his blade forward, ending the fight in one brutal blow. The officer collapsed, lifeless. Silence fell across the camp. The scarred man dropped to one knee, his hand pressed against the wound in his side. His chest heaved, his face pale, but his eyes still searched for her. The alien woman rushed to him, her chains clattering as she fell at his side. She pressed her hands against his wound, desperate to stop the bleeding. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "Don't die. Not now. Not after everything." He looked at her, his lips parting as if to speak. But no words came. Only silence. Her eyes burned with tears she did not understand. She had doubted him. She had feared betrayal. But now, with his blood staining her hands, she knew the truth. He had never planned to betray her. He had risked everything for her. The soldiers stood back, shocked into silence. None dared to move against him now. None dared to touch her. In that moment, she realized something that shook her to her core. The scarred man was no longer just her captor. He was her shield. Her protector. And if he died, she would be lost. She pressed harder against his wound, whispering again and again, "Stay alive, please, you must stay alive." The night swallowed them in silence, but her voice carried hope, fear, and something deeper. Something that bound them together stronger than chains. Something she had never thought possible between human and alien. The night after the battle was heavy with silence. Smoke drifted through the ruined camp, carrying the bitter smell of blood and fire. The alien woman knelt beside the scarred man, her hands pressed hard against his wound. His skin was pale, his breath uneven. She whispered over and over, her voice breaking, "Stay alive, please, stay alive." Every second felt endless. Every shallow breath he took was a fragile thread holding him to life. Around them, the other soldiers stood uncertain. Their commander was dead, their numbers broken, their future unclear. None of them moved to help. None of them dared to challenge the scarred man anymore. His silence had become something more than defiance. It was command. Finally, when dawn came, the scarred man stirred. His eyes opened slowly, filled with pain, yet still steady. His gaze found hers, and for the first time, a small spark, almost, like a shadow of a smile, passed across his lips. Relief flooded her chest. She held his arm, her voice trembling. "You're alive." He did not answer, but his eyes told her what words could not. The soldiers buried their dead and abandoned the camp. The chain of command was broken, and fear of the scarred man kept them silent. By nightfall, the camp was gone, scattered into the forest. Only he and the alien woman remained. She helped him walk, his arm heavy across her shoulders. Every step was slow, painful, but she refused to let him fall. They moved through the forest, leaving behind the trail of blood and war. For the first time, she was not his prisoner. She was his companion. Days passed. They found shelter in an abandoned farmhouse on the edge of a ruined field. The walls were broken, the roof leaking, but it was enough. Here, away from the soldiers, they could breathe. At night, when the wind howled through the cracks, she sat close to him, tending his wound. Each time she pressed cloth to his side, he winced but never pulled away. His silence was no longer empty. It was trust. One evening, as the firelight flickered between them, she finally spoke the truth that had been burning inside her. "I thought you would kill me," she whispered. Her hands trembled as they held the cloth against his wound. "That is what I was told. That is what I believed about all humans." He looked at her, his scar catching the light. His lips parted, and in his broken voice he spoke a few words in his language. She did not know the meaning, but she felt it in his tone, calm, gentle, certain. Tears stung her eyes. She pressed her hand against his, holding it there. For a long time they stayed like that, two enemies bound not by chains but by something neither of them could name. But danger still lingered. Scouts searched the forest, both human and alien. She knew that if either side found them, they would be hunted. To the humans, she was still the enemy. To her people, he was a traitor. There was no place left for them in either world. One morning she stood at the doorway of the farmhouse, staring at the horizon. The fields stretched out, empty and unknown. Behind her he stepped forward slowly, his wound healing but his strength not yet returned. Their eyes met. For the first time she spoke not with fear but with certainty. "We cannot stay here," she said. "If they find us, they will kill us both." He nodded once. His silence carried agreement. She tightened her grip on the blanket around her shoulders. "Then we go. Together." The scarred man reached out his hand. She looked at it, her heart pounding. Slowly she placed her hand in his. His grip was firm, steady, and warm. In that touch, she felt everything. The mercy that had spared her. Life. The shield that had protected her. The bond that had grown between them. It was not fear anymore. It was not hate. It was something far stronger. They left the farmhouse behind, walking into the endless horizon. The land ahead was broken, scarred by war, yet filled with possibility. Every step they took was uncertain, but for the first time the alien woman felt no dread. She had expected the human to kill her. Instead, he had given her something she had never known before: safety, hope, and a future she could not yet name. They disappeared into the distance. The wind carried the unspoken truth. Two enemies had become more than survivors. They had become something new, and together, they would change everything.